The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to the Happiness Jungle TV show. My name is Cami Baker. I am your guest host today, and I am really excited to have a gentleman that I met very recently in Boston. He had such a phenomenally interesting story that I said, you know what, instead of telling me your story, let's tell it to everyone. So I have Dr. Ed Shapiro here with me today, and we met at a networking event. Imagine that, going to a networking event. And when you started talking about what you do with the Nobel Laureates, I thought it would be better for you to just share it with everyone. Tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and what this is all about.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us, inviting me, inviting the idea, inviting the movement, which is working with people who made phenomenal, greatest discoveries in mankind. Nobel Laureates. It is 118 years since the first Nobel Prize was awarded for discovery what we call today X-rays. And that discovery happened absolutely accidentally. It's probably too long to share everything with you. However, that greatest happened just as a dream. Someone managed to recognize that discovery, and many Nobel discoveries happen exactly the way is the first one.
Now, why is it named Nobel Peace Prize? What is the history of that?
Oh, it is not necessarily peace. There are total 6 Nobel Prizes.
Okay.
They are in technology, or science, such as physics, chemistry, physiology or medicine, in literature, economics, and finally, Peace Prize. And they been awarded over this 118 years, over 900 times. Just imagine, mankind, how many people on our earth, exceeds 7.5 billion human beings. Today we have only about just over 300 living Nobel laureates. So such a minuscule fraction of all of us. However, the whole world works, lives, dreams, thanks to their discoveries. Imagine the internet. The roots come back to communications discovered by Nobel laureates. All the phenomenal things which happen or are being happened, most of them are based on a great science created by many scientists in the world, of course, at universities, industrial companies. However, the bulk of them comes from just a few hundred people who make fundamental discoveries and visions.
When you and I first met, and I heard you say that what you do is you partner the Nobel laureates with schools and have them visit the schools. I thought how awesome that is, because I have clients and friends that are doing things in schools and with big groups of kids, and what a great partnership that would be. Talk to us about what was it that inspired you to reach out to these Nobel laureates and ask them if they would even do this. What does it look like?
Oh, this is truly wonderful you mentioned, since we bring Nobel laureates to their local, it just happened, public schools. There is a reason, unintentional originally, since public schools happen to be more receptive to our offer to bring a Nobel laureate to them. However, I discovered recently that most Nobel laureates, say over 90%, I'm almost sure, graduated a public education. For one reason or another, it's just a phenomenal puzzle for me to somehow come to realize what was a fundamental reason for that.
So when you bring the Nobel laureates into the school systems, they're basically saying, even at public school, you can get this kind of an education and do what we're doing.
Well, based on what I just shared with you, it looks like it is possible to achieve greatest discoveries, dreams, if you come out from a public school.
That is interesting.
It is interesting, and still remains a puzzle to me. Why is it so predominant?
So how did you get inspired to bring the laureates to the schools?
Oh, you go to the very bottom of and roots of how all this happened. Well, number one, I must share, about 18, 19 years ago, with a friend in Russia, we collected and published all Nobel lectures delivered since 1901. Nobel lectures are part of a Nobel Prize presentation, Nobel lecture and the laureate's biography or autobiography in many cases. We collected them all back 18 years, since 1901, translated into Russian, since my friend was in Russia and the idea came from that country, and published as a remarkable library of 60 volumes covering all Nobel events from the first one until 2003. The publication was completed in 2007, at which point I was inspired to bring this phenomenal library to the United States, where I live with my family permanently. I was not able to raise a dime for doing that. And being so much determined, trying to realize that dream of mine, all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, I jumped. It came to me as a dream. Since I am in the United States, it would not be necessary to have books. Since I realized out of over 300 Nobel laureates globally, over 2/3 of them reside in the United States.
Of course they do.
Absolutely. Somehow it happened. All I had to do at that point was to connect with all Nobel laureates and describe what.
That's all you had to do.
Absolutely.
All you got to do is reach out to them. Were they easy to find?
Yes.
Yeah.
However, it was a task to get connected and get hold of them because they're busiest people in the world. They primarily on travel or in the middle of new projects. So I was just determined, as if it's my new dissertation for some other degree. The prior first was in physics. Now I have to create a new dissertation working with Nobel laureates in all nominations, in all 6 nominations. And many of them happen to be quite receptive. Over these 17, 18 years, I connected with most of Nobel laureates in the United States. And since 2008, we began our first original Nobel Laureates School Visits. To this day, we organized over 80 Nobel Laureates School events all across the United States, primarily in Massachusetts simply because it's least expensive. Since all events are free, we do not charge students or schools. All is financed by my organization and happily with my wife who supports this initiative. Galina, we've been married over 40 years, almost 40 years, exactly 42. I hope she remembers, she noticed that I remember when we got married. So we are just over 42 years old, married. And Galina wholeheartedly supports this initiative. This is how it has been.
So you've had it happen 80 times. Do you have the laureates on standby? Do you have a handful that are ready to visit a school as soon as you find a school? So are you looking more for schools to do this with?
All the time. To your probably shock, I will share with you what happens. When I prepare a Nobel event, it takes me roughly somewhere between around, say, 17 hours to locate and identify and recruit, so to speak, a Nobel laureate when they can dedicate 2-3 hours of their busy life to our event. It takes, to my shock, over 50 hours, 2, 3, 4 times longer to find a school interested or able to schedule a Nobel laureates event. And this is a puzzle. And it still exists.
So are you looking for a certain age? Do you want them to come in to speak to the high school kids, or are there any certain age bracket or certain kind of school that you look for?
Originally, with several Nobel laureates, we decided, let us do it with the youngest, say, grades 3, 4, 5, elementary schools. And we tried a couple of times, it didn't work, since the kids could not stay quiet. They needed to jump, run around. It was not physically natural situation for them to stay motionless or pay attention. Therefore, we decided to continue with a middle and high schools. So we attend, we bring Nobel laureates, we work with grades starting 8 and up.
And you've mentioned public schools. Do you do it with any other groups like Boys and Girls Club or?
This is something really interesting I also discovered. On a couple of occasions, I approached Nobel laureates asking to maybe go to private schools or some non-involved with public education. I noticed some hesitation to accept that, and they always confirmed with me that public school would be their #1 choice. Reason, you share with me what your guess can be. Most of them came out of public, and this is probably why they try to ignite all the young talents in their group.
Well, I know when we first met, one of my thoughts was that I have a client who is putting together a Shark Tank event. So if you have a Shark Tank event and you've got 100 kids, most of them from the public school, not necessarily one, but the whole community, that are entrepreneurial in mindset, business savvy, creating products, creating services, that sort of thing. It seems like that group of kids would be really, really open and excited to hear from a Nobel laureate.
I'll be definitely delighted to work with you on that, and I will certainly give it all my energy to see if Nobel laureates would be willing to participate in events like this.
Now, you mentioned having this finance, that you and your wife have a foundation. So do you, I would assume that the Nobel laureates do it for free, but there's travel time. I mean, what exactly is an expense to bring one in on typically?
This is what it is. I receive Social Security for my many-year work, and I do not receive, I made quite a few inventions, several dozen inventions. However, I do not receive any participation, any rewards, financial rewards for that, since my companies where I was employed, they do. So my Social Security and Galina's whatever income we have. This is why we primarily travel and do it within Massachusetts. We live in Massachusetts, so this is the least expensive. I have several friends who participate from time to time, of course.
It seems to me like that there would be businesses that would want to sponsor and be a part of something like that.
I hope, yes.
I mean, I'm just going to say Microsoft just because it comes to mind. I mean, I would imagine that Microsoft or Staples or someone who would be wanting to be known for supporting entrepreneur mindset would want to foot the bill to bring the laureate in and, sponsor the whole event. On average, you've done this 80 times. On average, what does it actually cost to make an event happen?
Well, my travel expense is included. We hire a limo, chauffeured private limo to bring Nobel laureate round trip from their residence or office to schools. Then we, at the end, always have a pizza to share with school kids and whoever is around. And Nobel laureates are always glad to
have pizza.
Participate. Yes, absolutely, yes.
So you mentioned there have been, most of your events have been in Massachusetts. Does that mean that a lot of the laureates actually live in Massachusetts, or are they willing to fly here on their own dime?
nobody of Nobel laureates is flying for our events. They're always local. And we are definitely happy in Massachusetts, since out of, say, over 200 Nobel laureates in the United States, over 30 reside in Massachusetts, which is 15%. So we have a rather impressive bench of Nobel laureates here to satisfy all these phenomenal things.
So what does it normally look like? The limo picks up the laureate, the limo brings them to the school. Is it an hour, 2 hours? Is it an assembly of the whole school? Tell me what it looks like.
Of course. And this is a process, selection process, that is. In order to be most efficient, what we ask schools to do is, number one, if kids would like to participate in the meeting, to meet with Nobel laureates, we ask that they read the biography or autobiography and the Nobel lecture, which is physics or chemistry or physiology or medicine or literature or economics or peace, and prepare questions to ask the laureate. The school, the teacher responsible, in charge, collects all the questions and try to answer them locally at school first. And then they select what questions to ask the laureate. They mail it to me, and when we meet the laureate, traveling to such a school, laureate has a chance to review the questions and get ready.
When you have reached out to the Nobel laureates, because when you and I met, one of your questions was that when you want to get back in contact with them, how to reach out to them. But you've already made relationships with a lot of these folks. So when you first reach out, what is your approach to them? What are you saying that gets them interested in taking their time to do this?
Try to imagine the simplest possible. I just tell them what I do and ask to participate. And if they have a chance to find a couple of 2-3 hours of their schedule, they always do. Sometimes it happens, they say, Ed, no time. It happened on a couple of occasions that particular Nobel laureate said, Ed, next year, and I mark the date. I call that particular date next year, and I remind, and the laureate says, fine. Or they said, Ed, next year. I mark that date again. The longest it happened was 4 years, but eventually it did happen. It came to a point when Nobel laureate said, you know what? Let's do it the first date possible. No delay anymore.
So you'll set up the Nobel laureate first, and then you find a school that wants that particular laureate to come in?
It's not a particular laureate. The thing is, as you asked before, what happened at the meeting, at the Nobel laureates event. It is not a lecture. This is what happens when members of a family get together. They sit down and they first look at one another and they ask questions. And this is what happens at a regular Nobel Laureate School event. Since students already know and familiar and see Nobel laureates through their own life and through their own families, they know what to do. They ask exactly questions they're most vitally interested in.
Mm.
And they ask questions about their future, about Nobel laureates' life, about Nobel laureates' family. They ask about how much money they get. They ask any question which comes to mind. There is no pre-selected questions at all.
What's the most interesting one that you've seen that just had the most impact?
This is an exciting question because I cannot identify its all and every time great celebration of dreamers.
Mm.
Nobel laureates are dreamers by their nature.
Yeah.
Children are dreamers by
Yeah.
their nature. And these two kinds of dreamers, they get together and they celebrate the event as if this is just a phenomenal part of their lives. So they all agree.
That's wonderful. The last guest I had today, I asked her what would be one thing she would share with any entrepreneurs. And she said to keep dreaming, keep going after your dream. And entrepreneurs by nature are dreamers. We can't do what we do if we don't have a big dream, because it's a process. And I would love to talk to you about having one of these laureates be a judge when we do the Shark Tank. It would be great to publicize that one of our judges is an actual Nobel laureate.
I'll be delighted to arrange for that. I'm almost sure I will find at least one, maybe more Nobel laureates to participate.
Well, we've got about 30 seconds left. Is there anything that you want to ask our viewers for? Are we looking for funding, for schools? What can we help you with?
The first to ask our dear viewers to help their children to stay as curious as they possibly can, as long as it's possible, to see their future through Nobel laureates' lives, through their own life, and definitely be so kind and help our Nobel Laureates School Visits philanthropy to visit as many schools as Nobel laureates would like, as we would like, and you.
Well, we're coming to an end. I would love to thank you for being with us on the show. Happiness Jungle is really happy today. Thank you.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.